Here's another unpopular opinion. The iconic New York City loft is dead. Real estate was never considered cool until the invention of the New York City loft. Prior to that, people had their apartments, their shops, and their offices. And while those types of real estate could be considered many things, cool didn't come into the real estate vernacular until the New York City loft. As manufacturing died in New York City by the 1950s and 60s and moved to cheaper rural areas because highway transport became better, allowing for manufacturing to be produced outside of urban cores, so did the need for these types of buildings. It left a lot of empty buildings from the earlier part of the century that had high ceilings for industrial equipment and plenty of oversized windows to allow for light and airflow, since there was no HVAC back then. Raw and expansive space, exposed features, large wooden beams, mushroom columns, massive steel windows, open space that inspired creative thinking and creative doing. By the 1970s, these buildings had been abandoned, and these loft spaces became ideal for artists who needed cheap space to live and work. They were far away from residential areas and located in industrial zones. In the 1980s, the contemporary art scene blew up in New York City and drew a lot of attention to these areas. And by the 1990s, everybody wanted to live in a loft. Typically, people who would have the means to live in fancy co-ops in Uptown now wanted to be downtown where the cool was. Developers took notice of this trend and started buying up these buildings on the cheap and converting them into condos. The term loft became a marketing jargon. So what's happened? What was once raw and expansive space is now divided for maximum value. The idea of maximized use is the opposite of the loft principle. The loft is about abundance of space, light, height. You never break up the flow. Developers saw it differently, and they squeezed traditional apartments into loft buildings. The exposed details are now covered with sheetrock due to code changes. The open space is now divided into additional rooms, bedrooms, gyms, and offices to maximize value. Creatives don't go to the gym or the office, let alone have a spare bedroom for guests. These once industrial neighborhoods that became artist sanctuaries have now been gentrified by the wealthy who need turnkey spaces. Hence, the New York City loft is dead. Let us know your comments below.